The next one is 65. This is all about torment, by the way. The last few minutes, the mitzvah is about torment, and they can't torment people with words or torment people with money. The next mitzvah is you are not allowed to torment widows and orphans. You must deal with them gently and compassionately. Now, the basic idea here is that widows and orphans are obviously vulnerable, and a widow, an orphan is considered an orphan until he is capable of fending for himself. So there's no official line when he's an orphan, but in general, people are very, very, very careful not to mess with widows and orphans. In halacha, it is regarded as being very severe. You have to treat widows and orphans with kid gloves. Now, the Torah says that somebody who does cause torment, anguish to widows and orphans, the Torah says that he will be punished, and the wording of the Torah is he will be punished that his wife will be a widow and his children will be orphans. Right? The Torah says he will die, and his wife will be a widow and his children will be orphans. So the obvious question is, well, if you die, so by definition, the wife is a widow. So what does the Torah emphasize? You will die and your wife will be a widow. Well, obviously. Why the double emphasis? Why does the Torah have to re-emphasize the fact that when he dies, his wife will become a widow? That's an automatic. So the Talmud says, because he will die an unconfirmed death, and he will disappear somewhere, he'll die, but his wife won't be able to remarry. And that will be a way of, and she will be what's called a living widow. She'll be an aguna. Now, what's the question?
That count for widowers as well. You're allowed to torment them.
He's not as vulnerable. You shouldn't torment anybody, but he's not considered as vulnerable as a widow.
Fathers allowed to torment their sons?
Nobody's allowed to torment anybody. The Torah just makes nobody's allowed to torment anybody for the sake of absolute torment. That you're not allowed to do. I torment my children, and my wife says I could be arrested, but that's just for the sake of torment. That's just purely for the sake of torment. But you're not allowed to torment anybody. Here, the Torah is telling you that it's extra special. That's a good question. It doesn't apply to a widower because nobody. There's this picture of the vulnerable widow. She's vulnerable. A widower is sad, but he's not vulnerable. He's a man. He's capable of taking care. A widow is like, what do we do now? Where are we going to get support? Who's going to take care of us? That sort of thing. So the Torah says that he's going to disappear, and it will be an unconfirmed death, and his wife will remain a widow. Now, there was actually a guy in, I think I mentioned this, in the Twin Towers when the plane hit. There was a guy who knew he was going to die, so he called the local rabbi to say, I'm going to die, just to release my wife from the bonds of that she shouldn't be an aguna. The wife shouldn't be an aguna. An aguna is the worst situation. Now, there seems to be a punishment here for the wife. Why should the wife be punished? Because this guy tormented another widow. So there are two answers there. One answer is that there seems to be a certain responsibility. A wife is responsible for her husband's behavior, as we see in this week's parsha. When Korach is egged on by his wife to start the rebellion, and On ben Peles, who is mentioned in the first pasuk, it's his wife that keeps him out of trouble. When they started the rebellion, so On ben Peles came home one day and his wife saw a glint in his eye, which women are good at seeing. She said, "What's up, On?" "Oh, nothing. How was the day?" "Good, good." So she gave him supper, and then a few minutes later, "What's up, On? Something's going on." Women can see that. He said, "Well, nothing, just a rebellion." "Who's the rebellion?" "Well, Korach, me and Korach and Dosan and Aviram, that Moshe has taken too much." And the wife says, "Listen, what's in it for you? If Korach wins, you're going to follow Korach. If Moshe wins, you're going to follow Moshe. What's in it for you?" He says, "Well, listen, I gave them my word that I'm in with them." All of a sudden, people become very noble. You ever see people become very noble? It's like a guy you catch in high school dealing drugs. You can pull the kid to the office. You say, "Okay, who is doing it with you?" "I wouldn't rat on my friends." "No, but you're willing to kill other kids at the school, but you won't rat on you." All of a sudden, he turns noble on you. So On ben Peles says, "Sorry, I gave my word." So the wife says, "You know what? Let me take care of it." So she gives him, the Medrash says, she gave him wine to drink. And he fell asleep. And he went to sleep, and then she went outside, and the next day when they came to collect him, she let down her hair, and when Korach and his men saw the woman outside, the unsneas, they turned away. They forgot all about On ben Peles. That's what the Medrash says. What's interesting is, what did she do in order to make sure her plan works? Put the husband to sleep. That's the best. You've messed up enough as it is. Yeah, now let me just take care of everything else. Now, you just go to sleep. That's the best and safest place for you to be, right? So she takes care of it. So there's a medrash that says there was a man and a woman who were married. They were both tzaddikim. And at a certain point, they didn't have children, so they had to split up. So he married a wicked woman, and he turned wicked. And she married a wicked man and turned him into a tzaddik. And the medrash says, you see from here, the oldest saying, Heve Omer hakol min ha'isha. It all comes from the wife. It's all dependent on the wife. A guy came to a Rav. He said, listen, I was in yeshiva for 6 years. 6 years I had, the mashgiach. The mashgiach is in yeshiva, like the spiritual guide of the yeshiva. For 6 years, he couldn't get me to go to minyan in the morning. I was in that yeshiva for 6 years. I've been married a month and a half. My wife's got me already going to minyan. Now, how did she do what he couldn't do in 6 years? Right? The answer is, Heve Omer hakol min ha'isha. Right? They got their devious methods. So a man who's torturing other people, a man who's tormenting a widow, chances are his wife was involved some way or other. Otherwise, she would have known about it. She would have trained him, number one. Number two, there's a punishment to him because a woman who's left as a widow by a husband, it's very interesting, people who are widowed at a younger age, they are very unforgiving of the spouse. They blame the spouse. What did you leave me for? What did you leave me? Now, obviously, he didn't choose to die. But people are not always reasonable. And often a woman can get to the point where she actually curses him. What did you leave me for? You took the easy way out and left me here. Thanks a lot. Thanks for dying. Now I got to take care of all this, right? And they can become very unreasonable. And he may suffer the consequences of her curse. Even after he dies, he'll be cursed because that's what the commentaries say. And therefore, his punishment is that what do you call it? That he'll die on unconfirmed death. Now, I'll just tell you one frightening medrash. The medrash says, on Yom Kippur, we mentioned the medrash of Rabbi Shmuel with the 10 martyrs. On Yom Kippur at Davening, we mentioned the 10 martyrs who were executed by the Romans, including Rabbi Akiva. So the first two that went out to be executed were Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who was the Nasi. He was the prince. He was the head of the Sanhedrin. They were taken out to be executed first by the Romans. So the Medrash says, I'll pay attention to this Medrash because this is an unbelievable telling insight into our responsibility level on how careful we have to be with people. The Medrash says that on their way out, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said to Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol, look, to die, to give up my life, to be killed in the service of God, that I could deal with. But it would be much easier for me to know why this decree has been made on me. Then I could go to my death with greater accept it more. So Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol said to him, look, you're the Nasi. You're the head honcho of the Jewish people. Did it ever happen that somebody came to your door because they needed you, and you made them wait at the door while you went to fetch your shoes or to get a cup of water? So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, thank you very much. Now I understand. The inconvenience you caused the Jew to wait for you when they needed you, that's why you're being executed right now. That's what Rabbi Shmuel Kohen Gadol said to him. Okay, he's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he's on a very high level, and so on and so forth. But that's a level of accountability that we all have. We all have this level of accountability. You can't cause people, somebody needs you or somebody calls you. Sometimes people have rules. I have a policy. They knock on the door, and the guy's sitting down to eat supper. And the guy gets up to the door, and there's a poor man, and he stands at the door, talks to him, gives the guy some money. He sits back down at the table. His wife said to him, Herschel, you just sat down to eat supper. Why are you getting up? You can't get up in the middle of supper. He says, look, there's a halacha that you can't stop in the middle of Shemona Esrei. There's a halacha that you can't stop in the middle of Say Kriya Shema. There's no halacha that says you can't stop in the middle of supper. And people create their own I have a policy. I don't interrupt supper for anything. Yeah, but maybe you should. That's your policy. That might be God's policy. So each person has to know what he's capable of and where he's holding. But at the end of the day, we're held to a very high exacting standard when it comes to causing people any tsar. Torah is very exacting with us. Okay, tomorrow we'll continue with Hashem.